Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to the afternoon sessions of CBD Live Europe. So far, we've heard incredible insights from market intelligence to the ways that technology can be used to improve the cannabis sector going forward. And now we're going to talk about something which affects every single CBD business out there, whether you're in the UK or Europe. We're looking at how to market your CBD brand effectively and also responsibly, which is a really important part of everything that we do in CBD. Please welcome to CBD Live author and podcast host, Mary Biles. And we're also pleased to have with us today cannabis lead at leading PR firm, the PHA Group, Kajal Shah. Welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us at CBD Live.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you. Hope you're both well, and we're in for a really insightful discussion, I think, because the three of us together come from very different pockets, but related pockets within the media world, within the cannabis sector. So maybe we should start, Kaj, you were showing me a short while ago some of the interesting headlines that you have found pertaining to, cannabis stories, CBD stories, medical cannabis stories. Let's bring that up on the screen and show everyone else what we're talking about here. And it's just to kind of show examples of the way cannabis, CBD, medical cannabis, recreational, is kind of portrayed in the mainstream media. So let's have a look at this first. You got some very interesting headlines here. Perhaps a favorite might be the stoned sheep on psychotic rampage after eating cannabis plants dumped in a Welsh village. So what from your expertise as, a PR background, what do you kind of think of, or where does your mind go when you read these kind of headlines in the mainstream media?
I think you can definitely see there has definitely been a shift in terms of the language, but also how CBD and the cannabis industry in general is portrayed now in the media. Some of these headlines, are going back from 2016 all the way up to 2021, and a lot of them are from different outlets, whether they are the broadsheets, more consumer focused pieces, but also the red tops as well. And I'm sure you'll have a fun guessing game as to which headline belongs to which paper. I think from definitely what we can see is the topics are so vast here. We've got, everything going from product reviews. So you can see the sort of the 15 best CBD drinks, to sort of more advice pieces about, how long do edibles take to work, and sort of the safety promises and things like that. But there's also the life stories, the case studies, which, are really helpful in articulating why CBD has transformed someone's life. So you can see that here, on the medical cannabis side, but also on sort of life changes by CBD. Because we still have to be kind of careful about the medical claims. But I think the key thing for me is also just the way that the language has changed in terms of going away from marijuana. So I would say definitely call it by the proper term, whether it's CBD or cannabis, rather than skunk or marijuana, which have those negative connotations. And just, I think, be wary about headlines can change the article completely. Sometimes it doesn't always relate to the content. Sometimes they'll put in words like lacing drugs or, rush to hospital and things like that, which give that sort of negative perception. So it's definitely helpful to understand and build that relationship with the journalist beforehand.
Yeah, and I think Mary, you might agree with this in terms of, from my point of view as a journalist, who doesn't just work in the cannabis space, but who comes from other sort of sectors as well in the mainstream. Words like hallucinations, paranoia, anxiety, high, they're all designed to get clicks. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And I think also what can happen, the journalist who has written a very kind of truthful, representative article actually sometimes doesn't actually have any power over the headline that eventually gets used. So, that there is a certain amount of relinquishing control when you engage in that process. with journalists and newspapers, you know, even if it's through using a PR company. But I think, you know, because of the huge success and of CBD, you know, I think the fact that probably lots of journalists are using it now, actually, so they have a greater understanding of it. So there's definitely a big change that's happened. You know, you're still going to get those headlines of, you know, kind of using weed and high, etc. in the red tops, but I think elsewhere, you know, that is changing. And actually, you know, I'm always kind of astounded, you know, with the Daily Mail, you do get some really positive stories in the Daily Mail, actually, because ultimately, you know, newspapers, it is story driven, and it's not always the kind of negative stories. They do want the kind of, particularly these days, the you know, the kind of heartwarming success stories, actually, you know. So and we are increasingly seeing that, particularly in the Daily, not so much in the Mail on Sunday. I think they've still got an agenda which is very kind of anti-cannabis, but the Daily Mail, I mean, you know, I'm shocked sometimes just how positive the stories are there.
And I think, you know, that's probably a sign of where something has come from, like a real true to life story, you know, a first person account, the human interest angle, you know, the kind of stories like CBD changed my life, CBD gave me, you know, this part of my life back, all those kind of stories. So Kat, I suppose from your point of view, you know, I'm an editor, you're on the other side of the fence at the PR desk. How, you know, if we look at these headlines just kind of one by one, or pick a few out very quickly, you know, how many of these would you say came from a PR campaign?
Several, the good ones, I'll say that.
The good ones.
Obviously for that, but I think it's all different sort of tactics that we use as an agency, but also, you know, CBD companies and startups should also start to think about what stories fit with the demographic that they're trying to appeal to in terms of consumers, but also, you know, what is your story? So, you know, cases like the cannabis sort of case studies, you know, Save My Daughter's Life, the sort of the well-known campaigner about the Brexit and cannabis medicine from Netherlands. Those are definitely stories that you know, PR agencies do place, as also, you know, profile stories as well. So when an entrepreneur wants to talk about, they want to be, you know, the kingpin of cannabis or something like that, but also you know, just talking thought leadership, talking about industry issues is really important. So I think there's a healthy mix. Obviously, journalists themselves want to do the product reviews and do the more kind of the wellness angles themselves, but it's very helpful for us to also educate the journalists as well, in terms of what's going on in the industry, making sure that facts and figures are correct, because as you know, there's always going to be stigma, I think, with cannabis, and it's shifting all the time, and a lot of that is to do with the education of the consumer and the journalist.
Yeah, sorry, Mary, go ahead.
So I was just going to say just something that I also, you know, I think is an interesting development in the kind of content that's making to the mainstream media is actually the endocannabinoid systems getting spoken about a lot more.
And that's progress.
That is progress, and you know, it's incredibly helpful for, you know, for kind of giving validity to the, you know, the CBD industry, because it kind of explains, you know, in basic terms how it works, and so for me that's a great win, you know, the last few years that's getting out into the mainstream media.
Yeah, it's great to see people kind of voicing that now, especially doctors coming out and you know, talking about it a little bit more. So I think that gives it some weight. If we look at, or if we talk about some of the kind of examples, Kaj, if you wouldn't mind, Kajal, if you could talk about some of the examples of PR versus marketing, because what I see a lot of the time is brands who, you know, maybe don't have a massive budget, but obviously need to put their brand out there, need to get their messaging out there. And sometimes there is some of this confusion as to, you know, what's an article, what's an ad, what's editorial. So you might just run us through that very quickly for anyone watching who genuinely, you know, doesn't know the difference.
Yeah, I think we try and employ as many tactics as we can, but I think the important thing is it has to be rooted in your business and has to be truthful, not too fluffy. And I think the things that we tend to do that we see work really, really well is, profile pieces, which is about telling the founder, the entrepreneur story of why they came to find the CBD business, sort of their background, how they entered the market really, and the challenges that they faced. But also thought leadership, which is very much opinion pieces about things that are going on in the industry, which you can definitely push on different angles. So whether that's, the market, the finance market, whether that's about CBD and the consumer, you can talk about various different things on that. Press releases is something that a number of CBD companies and all brands tend to push. I think with that, you just have to caveat that it has to be newsy, it has to be punchy, it has to have the right facts and figures, and a good solid quote that can be used for sort of, any kind of media pushes that you're doing alongside that.
Yeah, I agree. As a person like receiving the press releases from the likes of yourselves, it's very much a case of sometimes you really just read the first 4 paragraphs and that's it, because you might have a lot going on. You might be on a print deadline. You might have a different publication that you're working on. You might have an event that you're coordinating. You could have 100 different things going on. And editors do tend to wear lots of different hats. So it can be a situation where you get a press release through and you kind of read down the first kind of 4 paragraphs and you think, okay, yeah, that's, I can use that in this article, or it can be something in its own right if it's newsy enough. But the crucial point of it is the first kind of top, few lines, a few paragraphs on that piece of paper are crucial to getting any recognition or any editorial mentions. So I think that's the one piece of advice that I would give to someone, whether they're using, a service such as your own, or they're using a freelancer, or they're using someone in-house. That's absolutely paramount to do that. But can I also just say, high-res images, please send high-res images with everything, because it's the first kind of response you're going to get from a journalist, especially if they're working in an online platform, who's, they're going to especially look for the images, particularly if it's a product-based kind of thing that you're looking for coverage for. Mary, I want to come to you on the online side of things, because you've got extensive experience in this where CBD is concerned, from your experience, with the podcasts as your own podcast host as well, with Cannabis Voices, but also with Project CBD. And I'd love to kind of pick your brain on how you approach kind of the multifaceted, I suppose, tree that has loads of different branches off it, be it content, SEO, who you have writing for you consistently. All those things matter.
Yeah.
Are they all equal, or is SEO king, or is content king, or what's the trick to getting great feedback online?
To be honest, just to add to kind of Project CBD and the blog and everything else, I did cut my teeth within the CBD industry. That's how I started in all this, basically. So it was 2016, so like 5 years ago now. So it was just before the cusp when the MHRA, kind of came down and said that CBD was this borderline product, and so it was both a medicine and a supplement. So I have kind of, I was within that kind of digital marketing world in this, working for, a CBD brand in-house, and then, I was sort of doing some freelancing stuff as well. So for me, you see SEO and good content are not mutually exclusive. They can and they should go together. So I know, there are kind of SEO. So we're kind of talking, perhaps not everyone knows, we're talking about search engine optimization. So this is a way to make sure that your ranking articles are ranking on Google. So there are certain kind of, rules that seem to kind of help, sort of rank for certain keywords. And sometimes it's, for me, it's like I'd see so often content that's like got no value to it as a reader, you know, that often CBD companies say, oh, we're, you know, we want to be an educational resource, and then they have these like 3,000 words kind of keyword stuffed articles that I can't actually, when I've started reading, I got to the end, which I never get to the end because no one ever gets to the end of them. I've literally learned nothing at all. And personally, I find that as a writer and, you know, as a CBD consumer and someone who's passionate about the cannabis plant, incredibly frustrating. But it is possible to write decent quality content that does take SEO into mind. And, you know, when I've worked, I don't do it quite so much these days, but when I've worked for CBD companies and I've had my SEO hat on, you know, I have managed to write decent content that has actually ranked, you know, on the first page of Google. So there is kind of an art to it. And I think, you know, it is something, even if you're a, you know, a small CBD company and you haven't got the money to kind of employ an SEO agency, you can teach yourself. There's loads of great resources online. I really recommend, you know, and there's something called moz.com, which is a great resource for kind of researching your keywords. You can sign up for, I think it's like either a week or a month that you can sign up to it for free. There's training that you can do. But you have to marry that with writing the quality content, and you have to really understand what you're writing about. So, you know, again, time and time again, you know, even within sort of CBD companies, I'm not talking now about, you know, kind of the mainstream media, sort of writing stuff that's just not correct, you know, particularly about the endocannabinoid system, you know, how CBD interacts in the body. So, you know, you've got to make sure you understand the material, or if you're hiring, you know, content writers, that they understand it. So it's not enough just to kind of like, you know, farm out some content to a content writer and then not read through it. You then have to be the editor, basically. You have to make sure it's factually correct. So, you know, there is an art to it, but it is possible. And, you know, if you are a little bit strategic about it, you can actually get some articles ranking, even if you're a small CBD company. You know, I've done this. I've helped CBD companies do this themselves, and, you know, and it's very gratifying to see that happen. To kind of add a caveat to that, the content that you're writing should be compliant in terms of what is acceptable for you know, a health supplement product. So you cannot be marketing your product as a medicinal product, basically. So, you know, and I'm not talking here, you know, your kind of explicit medical claims like, oh, there's somebody at the door.
Do you want to take a break and go and see that?
Yeah, I'm going to
It's
go
live,
see
so
that.
anything can happen. So I think what Mary was possibly alluding to was the kind of the MHRA, which is the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Agency, will talk about, you know, what you can and can't say about a product that's medicinal and not medicinal. CBD, they don't view that as a medicinal product. They view it the same as they would, say, a kind of random health supplement product that you get off the shelf in Holland & Barrett. So they're very clear that if you start to market your product, you know, by saying that it, you know, provides pain relief, that then becomes a pain relief product. It's not a non-medicinal product anymore. It's a medical product at that point, once you start making that claim. And if you make the claim, you have to back it up. So that's, I suppose, where the trickiness lies. And that's where a lot of brands, I find as well, kind of quite struggle to understand that. And when it's explained, they do, you know, see what the value is in getting it right.
There is actually, and I don't know if I can share it somewhere. I will share it. There's a great document which explains, basically, it's kind of, you know, tells you what, you know, what is medicinal product. And so what happens, I think, companies are, you know, they're all, you know, CBD companies are quite unclear about this area, and they kind of think, well, if I make some claims like, you know, CBD cures cancer, or I don't know, CBD has pain relief, whatever, that's just the only thing that the MHRA are interested in. But actually, what happens with the MHRA is they kind of do an audit of a company's site, and they kind of, you know, take all the different things. So yes, it could be an article about CBD for anxiety. When you mention what the scientific research is, you talk about how CBD interacts with the receptors in the body, that also for the MHRA constitutes that you're describing or you're marketing a medicinal product. If you have some testimonials, saying, from, kind of Trustpilot or something, if it's anything other than it's great customer service, the products arrived on time. If you've got one saying, somebody saying, I took the CBD and it really helped my anxiety, all these things constitute for the MHRA to come to the conclusion that you are marketing a medicinal product. And that's when you get into, you have problems and they send you a warning letter, but then they give you time to actually remove all these claims and become compliant again. So I think that's kind of, and it is something, I feel it's interesting. When I first started in this, I was the person writing the articles about, CBD for anxiety, CBD for arthritis, etc. So I'm kind of gone from kind of poacher to gamekeeper a little bit now, really, because I think it's, it is really important. There are, a lot of consumers are very vulnerable. They're very desperate. And if you're presenting products in a way actually that you haven't got the studies to back it up, which, you have to, if you are selling medicinal product, then it's just not fair. I just don't think it's ethical. So I guess that's the kind of, that for me, I feel very passionate about now, which is ironic, because if you'd said this to me 5 years ago, I would have been the person saying, oh, I should be able to say what I like and talk about the research and all the rest of it. But, times change.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And I think as the industry matures as well, there's more of a pressure to, be that brand that adheres to these kind of standards and be the responsible brand and not mislead, the consumer and be so transparent about what you're doing as well, which a lot of brands are starting to do now that we're a few years into the industry, in the UK in particular, which is fantastic. Kaj, I wonder if I can come to you and ask you, because you've worked on various different PR campaigns, some of them high profile, and some including, cannabis particularly. So what does a good campaign look like from your point of view? If someone were to come to you and say, I'm thinking of hiring you to essentially run my PR campaign, this is the objective that I have, what does that look like?
I think for most clients that come to us, it's very much they want to get coverage. That is the sort of the key goal for a successful PR campaign, is to position and build their brand, but also establish an authoritative voice in the market through the media. So we always ask what the business objectives are of that particular company in order to make sure that any PR strategy that we create is bespoke and hits the remit. Otherwise, there is no point. I think, generally, if your stories and your product is revolutionary but no one knows about it, then there isn't much point. So what we try and do is build that narrative and convey the purpose of that business along with your vision and your products, to make sure that people know about that particular brand. So in terms of success, it's very much about getting in the right media slots, whether that's more from a business perspective or potentially to the more kind of the wellness sector. So consumer journalists that add it into their hot list. So, Stylist or Metro, they have like, which 15 products to have for wellness or for sleep, anxiety and things like that. And that's a really good way for CBD to be placed.
And I suppose it's worth pointing out for people too, you can have a short lead time and you can have a long lead time on a lot of these kind of publications or, platforms, depending on where you want your product to end up. And I might be right in saying, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but, a good PR strategy would be to go for a mix of both and try and get some kind of fast turnaround, coverage in like a weekly or a monthly. And then, you might go for a little bit of a deeper kind of insight or deeper coverage in something like a bi-monthly or a quarterly publication or something like that. But I think it's really interesting to see how willing kind of the mainstream media is now to actually take on board CBD products and to actually do something like our top picks for CBD oil in February or whatever it is. I wonder, Mary, if I could pick your brain, and I think our thoughts might align on this quite a bit. when someone approaches you, with something CBD related, what's the best, and they want to get coverage out of it, whether it's to be on your podcast or for you to write something about them, what's, the best way to approach someone who basically has that kind of power, if you like, to give you coverage, to give your brand coverage and further your exposure?
I think it's all about kind of developing, for me personally, it's about someone who's developing a relationship. So it's not kind of like, going in, wham bam, thank you ma'am, can you promote my, I've got this CBD brand, it'd be really great if you could write about it, whatever. I instantly kind of delete those emails actually. It's, I don't know whether it's kind of, I need my ego to be kind of, fed a little bit maybe, but it's like, someone who knows a little bit about what I do, because, I am still within the cannabis echo chamber. I write for Project CBD. I don't promote CBD products within the articles that I write for Project CBD. In fact, it's very rare that I actually promote CBD products, but, occasionally, for example, recently I wrote something for a magazine called Planet Mindfulness, which was generally about hemp and what hemp has to offer, society, the environment, etc. I have a relationship that's developed over the years with a CBD company, and I did, mention their products. So I guess it's kind of going in, for me personally, going in gently, talking about the products, and trying to kind of, open a dialogue really. And, in a kind of very natural way. I don't respond well to press releases, in all honesty. So it's, for me, it's about dialogue and relationships. I mean, I don't know whether you find, you probably haven't got so much, you haven't got the time to develop relationships, maybe, I don't know, Roisin, but.
Yeah, it's a tough one, because I get those emails too about, wanted to let you know about this new CBD brand. And, I could get 5 or 6 of those a day, to be totally honest. So I think it goes back to Kash's point of being, newsworthy in your release, and also actually having like a punchline, like, having some, before you launch that product to the press, having some sort of data, having a focus group, having results from some sort of survey that you've done, or have a brand ambassador, or maybe you have a very high profile health specialist who has come on board as a brand ambassador, or someone who is a wellness guru, or something along those lines that makes you stand out from the rest, because the market in the UK is quite dominated at the moment, and there are a lot of similar brands out there at the minute, I'm not going to lie. So I think whatever makes you stand out, the wackier the better, to be quite honest, will get you the most coverage. And then you need a little bit of luck and a little bit of time on your side as well. I think timing has a lot to do with it too. But I suppose, kind of, Cash, just to bring you in on that as well, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, for, it is very true about sort of making sure that the stories that you read, it's worth noting who the journalists are, who's covering CBD, who's doing CBD and anxiety, CBD and wellness, CBD drink, whatever kind of product that you are pushing, whether it's edibles or the oils. I would just definitely note down who the journalist is, perhaps look at their Twitter handle. A lot of these journalists are very open to receiving CBD products to review and try out, but it's also worth just shouting out about your business. So keeping up to date with the news, tracking market events is, it's a worthy exercise to make sure that you can pivot your brand. And if you see a news story that you think, this is amazing, this totally fits our business, we need to get in there, then contact the journalist, and write the pitch well. I think short, succinct pitches are the best thing. These, journalists get, over 1,000 emails a day pretty much sometimes. So you just need to make sure that your message is strong.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to kind of bring the other facet of kind of effective marketing and PR, and it also touches on, that line of being responsible as well. I think something that we're seeing more in the American industry that's starting to happen in the UK now is influencer marketing. And so, Kat, obviously you have some experience in this from your background with the PHA group. So tell us a little bit about kind of the pros and cons to doing that. And obviously, would influencer marketing be something that is just available to the big brands with an unlimited PR budget, for example?
Well, I think this is a whole topic in itself. So we'll try and size it. But I mean, influencers are particularly, they are a powerful tactic to promote your brand, given the restrictions on these advertising platforms. They are a great go-to, but they are extremely expensive depending on which influencer. You have to make sure that you pick the right influencer for your brand, to make sure that it comes across as authentic and trustworthy, because at the end of the day, you are trying to target customers to buy your products. So that influencer has to be the right one, and has to believe in your product. I think we've all joined this industry because we're passionate about it and moving it along and making sure that people understand what it's all about. So yeah, making sure the right influencer is key, but also looking at micro influencers. So they're actually a much more kind of reasonable budget that you can work with, as opposed to sort of the big greats and celebrities. But I don't think influencer marketing should be your only tactic. I think there are a number of other opportunities, whether it's through PR, whether it's through other channels of social media, and marketing strategies that you could employ. So I never think you should do one standalone tactic.
Just while we're on this subject as well of, budgets and stuff like that, it's hard to quantify for someone what a good return on investment is from a PR point of view, because I feel like a lot of brands might have the kind of idea that they'll invest in influencer marketing, or they'll invest in advertising, or they'll invest in a PR service, and it could be that they think literally overnight their sales online are gonna go through the roof, and it's just gonna rain profits. We know it doesn't work like that. So how do you kind of manage expectations, and what does a successful kind of campaign look like? What's a successful outcome, I suppose, from a campaign?
I think definitely it's the coverage point of view, but also sentiment. So we do track, we have like sort of monitoring systems which track how the brand is now perceived, in comparison to a couple of months ago. If we get the Google Analytics, that's always really helpful, because then we can see, well, when that coverage was secured, that meant that you had a surge in website traffic, or that led to X amount of sales. So that's sort of the kind of the helpful touch points for us in terms of a successful campaign. But it's also just making sure that your name is out there. I think it is a saturated market. It's very difficult for brands to distinguish themselves. A lot of them want to talk about everything, whereas I think you should, look at the strengths, look at the sort of the root of your business, what's the appeal of your products, and also what's the demographic that you're targeting, and really go after those topics and those themes and do it well and own that space.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, with things like regulation coming down the line, particularly in the UK, we know that it's happening with regards to CBD. So we know that the market kind of just took off here, and the regulators had to play kind of catch up, which has happened, in other sectors as well. And then you look at other markets that, have been around for years, such as the vitamins and supplements, which are largely, unregulated in many parts of the world. So I think if that could be a good thing in terms of responsible kind of advertising and responsible marketing down the line. If we have some sort of guidelines to work with, I think that would be very useful for brands and for publications or platforms going down the line. I suppose before we take some questions, I'm just going to share something with our viewers. And this is just kind of a recap of everything that we've just discussed in the last half an hour. And I think one thing that will probably dominate in the questions is kind of content questions and SEO questions, perhaps. But I suppose from an editorial point of view, which can really help to boost kind of the number of eyeballs that are getting to your brand and your messaging and your products, is the content is king. Would you agree?
Stories matter for sure. And it's just important that that content is, you know, as Mary was saying, is quality content, no conjecture, factual, but punchy as well. And yeah, definitely think that.
And easy to read. It's like, you know, I mean, that's down to the person who writes it, right? And I suppose, I don't know, the amount of like dry, boring, you know, content, and then it's not even like factually correct. I think you may as well not bother, frankly. It's like, you know, there's an art to it. There is an art to it, really. But yeah.
And that comes back to something you said earlier on, Mary, about, you know, if you're looking to hire someone or get someone in-house to curate your content for your, you know, your blog or for your platform, whatever it is, they really do need to know what they're talking about, don't they?
But you know, but they do, but you know, also you have to be realistic. When I first started in this business, I didn't know what I was talking about. You know, you don't come out of your mother's womb knowing about the endocannabinoid system and you know how CBD interacts. So you know, it's yeah, they have to learn the subject material. And if, you know, if they're any writer worth their salt, that's what writers do, right? That's what journalists do. They gel up and they learn about what they're going to write about. Yeah, it's really good. And also just something that to mention, you know, I've seen a few times in my kind of Google feed recently, CBD stories from like local newspapers. And that's something that, you know, when I was kind of, you know, promoting my book, because it is really hard to get stories into international media. It is. I mean, the amount of times I pitch stuff and they'd never get back to me. So I'm from the Isle of Wight. So I pitched something to the Isle of Wight County Press, and they were delighted to write something about my book. And I think particularly, you know, in these kind of post-COVID days when we're supporting, you know, local businesses and what's happening in our local area, if you've got a positive story about your brand that you've started, you're a local person, you know, write to your local, you know, develop a relationship with your local press. You know, I mean, it make a nice change from writing about cats stuck up trees and stuff. So, you know, don't you know, go for the local stuff as well. And if you're a small CBD company, you know, you don't have to hire a PR company to do that. By the way, I love the fact that, you know, now in this kind of this world, we have a cannabis PR lead. I mean, I think that's brilliant. That speaks volumes about, you know, the changes that have happened in the last few years.
I totally agree with Mary on the local newspaper point. It's, you know, local papers are really proud to talk about the entrepreneurs and the businesses that are in the local area, supporting the economy and helping everyone there. So definitely a push for that, and try and move away from the advertorials. I think local papers will always try and push for you to pay for part of product reviews or for stories. But if you've got a good story and you sell it in the right way, you know, it should pay dividends. And also look at radio stations, not just newspapers. So we worked with one particular CBD wellness client and got them a great BBC local radio slot, and that paid, you know, had a massive effect on their business actually, and led to websites, led to sales and things like that. So definitely have a look and see how you can get onto those slots.
And just also to say that, you know, in terms of the kind of SEO side of things, you know, if you do get a link within, you know, your local paper or the national press, it's not just about, you know, the kind of the additional traffic that you're getting to your website. It's going to help with your domain authority actually, which also then helps you rank higher on Google. So, you know, even if it's not the kind of, I don't know, the Sunday Times, but it's your local newspaper, that still helps.
Yeah, you still get the backlink at the end of the day.
Yeah.
There's also like a Twitter tag called hashtag journo request, which we always find is quite helpful, and anyone can have a look. I mean, agencies do it, freelancers, everyone looks at it. But that shows any tweets from journalists that are looking for certain things. So sometimes there will be CBD tweets in there where a journalist is looking for a product or a CBD story. So it's worth looking at that.
I'm going to go ahead and answer some of the questions now with you guys, because we've got quite a few in, which is fantastic to see. But I feel like some of the questions will revert to some of these kind of summary points as well, these tips and tricks that we have here. So we'll go to, there's no name, but it's from a company called Shine Limited. Is there a difference between talking about the benefits of CBD as a whole and the brand's CBD product? So I think what they're asking here is, perhaps you might have a website, and maybe you're talking about the actual, you know, benefits of CBD and the endocannabinoid system without naming the brand. What do you think to that, Mary?
No, it's no difference.
Because it's still on the brand website.
Yeah, and I can tell. I mean, I won't name any names, but someone I used to write for did get investigated, and so I've seen the kind of stuff that the MHRA pull companies up on, and it's not that they were making any claims about their particular products. They were talking about CBD in itself. So just talking about how CBD interacts with the body is suggesting that CBD is a medicinal product. I think, trying to think of other stuff. I remember we had like a kind of listicle that was about exam nerves, things that you can do for exam nerves, and CBD was one of meditation, breathing exercises, and because I kind of referenced a study, that an anxiety study, that was something that was pulled up by. So but you have to remember, they almost do like a kind of audit. So they kind of go through what is the content on the company site, and they look for all this kind of stuff. And from bringing that all together, then they decide whether that company is marketing it as a medicinal product. So I don't know if that's helpful, but it's, whether it's you're making a claim about the CBD in your product or CBD in general, then it's the same.
Yeah. And I think it might be difficult for some brands to understand this as well, in terms of, how do you educate? Because everyone talks about how fundamental, cannabis education is to destigmatizing the whole sector and the whole community, and opening up kind of CBD products in particular to a wider kind of demographic. And I think you just have to be very careful, and it comes back to having the right person curating your content as well, who knows what line.
So I think you can also get CBD companies they get customers asking them questions all the time. I mean, I'm not talking now about, is CBD going to cure my cancer or whatever, but the kind of FAQ type questions, like about dosing, or I don't know, the difference between kind of broad spectrum and full spectrum, or kind of all that kind of stuff, where you're not making any medical claims. Actually, obviously with dosing, you can't tell a reader or a consumer or a patient how much to take, but all those things you can talk about, and I think that is valid education. Actually, I think that is genuinely helpful for the customer. I don't know whether it's so helpful for SEO. That's where you might have to sacrifice a bit of SEO, but I don't think you always have to have your SEO hat on.
It's the informative content, and I think with that, yes, you can definitely talk about the sort of the Q&As, and sort of whether it's dosing or the acronyms or anything like that. But usually at the end, they'll have a byline that will say, written by X from the CBD brand, for example, as long as that CBD brand isn't integrated in the full article. Pushing a product, because it just can't be seen to be advertising it, but can definitely talk about, and you need to talk about these issues, because consumers need to know how the product can help them and how it will impact their health.
Okay, we'll take one or two more questions before we wrap it up. Marcus has asked, how do you find, in terms of the best articles to write for SEO purposes, how do you find the best place that you can go to do such research with regards to SEO? So where, I suppose, is there one place you would recommend? I think you mentioned.
I really recommend Moz. Like, check out Moz. That's how I kind of learned about it. I'm not an SEO, not an expert, but I know enough. As I say, I know enough to have got articles ranking on the first page of Google just through looking on Moz, signing up to their service, for the kind of free period. You can try it out. Your products, that you have to look for the kind of low hanging fruit. So there are certain keywords you're never going to rank on, like buy CBD, you're never going to rank on that. But there are other sort of things about your products. Perhaps you're selling hemp tea, which is easier to rank on. You know, you have to be quite strategic and quite clever. But as I say, Moz is excellent for that. And they do have, you know, once you sign up for that kind of free trial period, you do get some free training. I'm not pushing Moz. I'm completely got nothing to do with Moz whatsoever. But I know it really helped me. Yeah.
One thing that you might be able to help with, Kaj, in this question is, I see certain CBD and hemp companies advertising on Facebook and Google, yet I thought this wasn't allowed. Is there anything I can do to get my PPC ads approved?
Yeah, they should. I mean, they're not allowed. I think the thing is CBD companies, some are very clever at sort of saying that, oh, it's hemp or it's CBD infused, to try and get around this sort of ASA regulations. But I'll have to come back on the PPC because I'm not so much a social media expert, but I'm happy to get your details and share those. I don't want to say anything wrong, so I'm going to be really honest. And
I do know LinkedIn does do they do allow some sort of ad. I think they verify them case by case basis. So I think LinkedIn is quite a good option if you're especially marketing to, I guess, a B2B audience, but just bear that in mind. If you had very little budget, this is from Cleena Mannion. Cleena, it looks like you're Irish by the spelling of your name, so hi. If you had very little budget, what is the top thing or top couple of things you would focus on? I would say your kind of regional and local press, and perhaps investing in some sort of you know, getting into the sector. Like the Cannabis is a great example, you know, a magazine that kind of has all the contacts in the industry, that's run by a very small team. And if you can connect and develop a relationship, like we were talking about earlier, with the people who are at the center of that kind of an organization, you can make further connections, and you can, I suppose, get coverage at a trade level and a consumer level. And once you start to get that kind of coverage, I think a lot more will follow as well. Obviously as well, I would say, Kaj, you might want to say something about, you know, have you used your own resources? Have you tapped into your own resources and what you can do without having to really spend a crazy amount on kind of outsourcing to various different things.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
I think also just making sure you amplify your content. I mean, I see on these CBD brands, they have fantastic websites, great blogs. Some of those blogs are so well written, you know, why can't it be pushed onto a newspaper, whether that's a local paper or, you know, a particular journalist that's writing about it. It's definitely worthwhile as a tactic to use, and to make sure that you're sharing that on your Twitter and your LinkedIn as well.
We're getting lots of questions in, and I'm really sorry we won't have time to answer them all because we have another panel starting on the hour. But just maybe one or two more questions. Let's have a look here. We've got a couple of questions in about clinical trials, so I'll try and merge them into one question. I don't know if it's something that we will be specifically able to help you on, but on the medicinal market, what do you think about trials being sponsored by brands? Is one question. And another question in relation to clinical trials is directed to you, Mary. There are over 12 million papers written on science each year. Not all are great. Is it not the case that who pays the piper names the tunes with regards to clinical trials? Kind of related there, Mary, if you want to take a stab at that one.
Well, clinical trials are really expensive, right? I mean, it's, you know, to get a drug to market from the Petri dish to you know, kind of phase 3 randomized controlled trials takes, I think, like billions of dollars. So we're in, you know, it's a horrible situation that unless you have a trial is funded by a pharmaceutical company, I don't see how else it's going to, you know, a drug is going to get to market. So and this is why, you know, this is going into kind of slightly different area now. You know, we've got this botanical substance that you can't patent. And so, you know, that there's a big discussion about the appropriateness of RCTs for cannabis medicine. So, I mean, you know, in terms of like the CBD market, I've seen, this is more in the kind of US whether they're clinical studies or observational studies. I think some of them are actually on clinical studies that are sponsored by hemp CBD companies. So, but you know, you've got to have deep pockets, I reckon, to be able to sponsor a clinical trial. So if you have, brilliant, you know, I don't have a problem with that. But then I guess at the end of it, you have to have something, in order to make it worthwhile, you've got to have something that you can patent, right? And can you do that with a hemp extract? I don't know.
And I think at the end of the day, you know, as long as the data is verifiable, and that's what we need verified, you know, data en masse to kind of further this and go further with it and have it, you know, as a mainstream kind of, you know, product as well, don't we? We're going to have to leave it there, but before we go, I would just like to give everyone's contact information, because we've had a few questions come in that we just don't have time to answer. I'm really sorry. But I know that Mary and Kajal will be really happy to answer any questions you have, as would I. So if you are hanging around the event, or if you're logged into the event, Kajal or Mary at any point in the afternoon, people can message you directly on the platform. Alternatively, Mary, how can people find your services? Pick your brain?
Yeah, I mean, my website's probably the best, which is my name, basically, marybars.com. And it's something I'm throwing it out there because I am, you know, because there is such a thirst for understanding, you know, how to kind of ethically and responsibly market your products and what you can say, what you can't say, and the whole SEO thing as well. I am thinking I've done it kind of once, but some training in that. So yeah, so that's kind of, I'm throwing it out there, and it'd be interesting to see whether people would find that interesting.
I think there's definitely an appetite for that, judging by the kind of interaction we've got on this panel.
So yeah, so feel free to contact me through my website, basically.
marybiles.com.
Yeah.
Cash, how about yourself?
I don't have my own personal website, unfortunately, but I can provide you my email. I don't know if is it easier just to type that on the group chat?
You can type it into the chat. Yeah, you can type it into the chat. And if anyone does need to get in touch with you directly, I know you're active on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And also, if anyone does need any kind of further details on anything we discussed today, you can get in touch with myself as well, and I can point you in the right direction. And you can just get in touch with us here at the Cannabist to do that, either by social media, on this platform, or through our website, cannabismag.com, where you'll find loads of more content, and this video as well will be sitting on there next week. So thank you to everyone for your great questions. I'm sorry again we didn't get around to talking to everyone today, but we will be able to answer your questions further if you want to DM us, and we will put you in touch with Mary and Cash if that is what you want more of. Thank you so much, ladies. Thank you for a really insightful panel. We could have talked about this all afternoon. There's just so much ground to cover, but I feel like we've covered the basics so far. Again, thanks to everyone for joining us today on CBD Live, and we wish you a very great event.
Thank you for listening.
Bye. Thanks everyone. Thanks for having us.
Bye.